Hello, I'm John Butler, Investment Director at Southbank Investment Research, and I'm joined today by my colleague, editor of the Fleet Street Letter, Nick Hubble. His latest monthly issue has caused quite a stir. He's raised this taboo topic, it seems, called dirty power. Nick claims we're suffering from a dirty power pandemic. So Nick, what exactly do you mean by that? Could you describe dirty power and how is it a pandemic?
Yeah, dirty power is sort of a simple idea. It's when the voltage and the frequency of the electricity on our grid goes outside of its range. The voltage might go too high or too low, and the frequency of our alternating current, our AC electricity, might go outside of its range as well. It's about 50 hertz is the target range. And the reason this is called dirty power is because it does damage. It does damage to anything that uses electricity, a bit like if you have water in your fuel for your car, or if you put in diesel instead of unleaded, or whatever it might be. Electricity has similar features in that if you have dirty power, it does damage to whatever is using it. And my claim in the Fleet Street Letter is that although governments are aware that we have a dirty power problem in our electricity grids, it is orders of magnitude more severe than they're letting on, and they're knowingly covering it up, and also that fixing this is going to cause a bit of a financial crisis for either industry or government or utilities or the grid management companies.
Wow, that sounds pretty bad. Is it really that widespread? I mean, could you give us a few kind of specific examples where dirty power is causing real problems for industry or whatever it is?
Yeah, there was an outdoor power supply issue at an airport. I think it was in 2017, and it caused some data centers to go offline, and this disrupted the airport. I can't remember which airport it was now off the top of my head. This caused untold damage. So it's a good example of how this connection from dirty power causing issues, especially with electronics, can then have this flow-on effect of doing all sorts of damage. There's also some good examples of big industrial companies that use a lot of power having their electronics that control their large machines go haywire. There's some estimates of this costing many billions of dollars or euros or whatever it was that the consultants were using. But my claim is that all of this is dramatically larger than anyone realizes because of the way that it's being measured. So my claim is that utility companies and grid management companies are managing and controlling for dirty power in a way that's sort of like marking their own homework. They're deciding when and where to measure for power instability, knowing where the problem lies and ignoring it quite carefully.
Well, okay. I mean, I can imagine why, of course, they perhaps don't exactly want full public awareness of what's going on here. But what's the ultimate source of this? I mean, has this always been a problem? Or is it becoming more of a problem because the way in which electrical generation, distribution, structure of the grid, and whatnot have developed in recent years?
Yeah, dirty power has been a problem for as long as electricity has existed, especially for alternating currents, because you've got this issue of frequency, how often the alternating current flicks back and forth. But the introduction of actually, I should to mention to be fair that a lot of our demand has become unstable as well. So the dimmer switch in your house creates dirty power because it uses an unstable or an unusual amount of electricity. But the key point in the monthly issue for the Fleet Street Letter, and the thing that we should be focusing on as investors, is that renewable energy and the infrastructure around renewable energy is creating a much larger problem than anyone wants to acknowledge. The easiest way to think about this and to understand it is to use the example of rooftop solar, although it's not the only example. So, rooftop solar is feeding electricity into a grid that was designed to transfer electricity in one direction. So, it's the same as if you suddenly drive the wrong way up a one-way street, or if you mix the pipe that is taking your wastewater out with your drinking water in, it ends in a disaster. And that's what rooftop solar is doing to the electricity grid. It's sort of reverse flushing electricity up a system that was only designed to allow one directional flow. And the consequence of this is dirty power. Now, that example is good because it's so easy to understand because we know, and even grid managers know and understand that issue. But the issue goes much deeper than that. So, for example, Renewable energy tends to use a lot of high voltage direct current power lines, but that has to be converted back to alternating current when we try and use it. And that conversion is never quite perfect. There's always some issues with that introduces dirty power. We know, of course, that solar panels provide direct current power, which has to be converted to alternating current. Again, that transfer is not perfect. There's a couple of other similar sort of issues that have come up as a result of this energy transition to renewable energy that is causing a lot of dirty power to show up. Some of it we know about, we understand where it is because it's on the grid where the grid managers are actively monitoring and managing it. But the grid managers don't measure quite carefully enough, at least, how clean the power is at the user's end. So, just in front of your house or just in front of your factory, or the power that's flowing into your, manufacturing facility. And my information from whistleblower inside this industry who's dealing with these problems and seeing these issues is that this is a vast problem, and that large companies especially are realizing that they're actually receiving a lot of dirty power, very dirty power, in fact, that's causing a lot of damage to their inventory, to their machinery, to their equipment, to all sorts of highly valuable equipment they rely on in order for their company to remain profitable. And that they are realizing this and starting to awaken to the cause of their machinery and equipment failing constantly and having a much shorter shelf life than it's supposed to. And all of this is building up to a moment where I believe industry is going to say, look, the power that we're actually getting is so bad that it's undermining our business's viability. And so we basically can't operate. I also believe that this is what's really behind so much of the deindustrialization trend that we're seeing, especially in places like Germany and, of course, California, and so many of these places that are turning to renewable energy, because that is the key source of the dirty power, at least the key source of the dramatic increase in that dirty power.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I can imagine a situation in which businesses who finally begin to identify what exactly the problem is here start to make a case. I mean, maybe even take up legal action. Maybe their insurance companies will not want to pay out on some of the damages here because they believe that there was fraud involved. And as you know, almost any type of insurance contract is obviated the moment that there is detection of fraud. So, I mean, the scale of this, if it indeed is still sort of hidden, but if the scale's anything like what your whistleblower is suggesting, this is going to become a huge issue that cannot simply be swept under the rug. Someone's going to have to pay, right?
Right, and it's already begun. So there are already cases where large businesses have been able to prove that the quality of the power coming onto their premises is below standard, and they have taken that to the grid manager, and as a result, the grid manager has upgraded or started to clean that part of the grid, or the company has put in place their own ways of cleaning up the power. There's voltage optimizers, for example, that to sustain a stable level of voltage that companies can buy. And that's really the big question here: is who's going to end up paying for this ginormous problem that renewable energy has created? Is it going to be private companies that have to pay to clean the electricity that they've got on their premises? Is it going to be the grid managers who are doing the transmission network? Is it going to be the utilities who are contracted to provide the electricity with the power user? Is it going to be the government that covers this? Is it going to be the renewables companies that are creating the problem of all of this dirty power? Nobody really knows yet. But if we're on the cusp of this going very public, then the problem becomes so large that a sort of comprehensive solution has to be found. And everyone needs to figure out, well, we've got this enormous problem, so what are we going to do about it? Because this piecemeal solution of, the key thing I want to get across here is that most people don't realize that dirty power is what's undermining their businesses. It's possibly in your home, on the very device you're watching this. It's possibly, destroying or reducing the useful life of the computer or the phone that you're watching this on. So most people don't realize that, right? It's a very hidden problem. And unless you're actively monitoring the quality of the power, the cleanness of the power coming into your industrial facility or your home, whatever it is, you might never know that that's what's undermining the whatever it is that's using power in your home or in your business. So the scale, the way this is being hidden is a key part of the story. And if it is exposed as being a very large problem, all of a sudden all the other dominoes start to fall quite quickly.
Well, look, as you point out, I mean, from the perspective of the typical household, this is a case where there might be widespread ignorance of the problem, but it's also a case, as you've explained now, where ignorance is not bliss, not at the household level, not at the business level. And as you say, it's not clear who is going to have to pay to fix this problem and perhaps to make good on past damages and arguably fraudulent behavior. But in the same way that ignorance isn't bliss in this case for everyone involved in the problem, it's also not for investors. That is, investors who do learn about the problem, who do think maybe something's going to change here. Is there actually a way to take advantage of this? Is there a way to potentially invest and profit in some sort of solution?
Yeah, I want to keep that for the Fleet Street letter reader's eyes only, at least for now. But what I want to emphasize is that if the real reason for the deindustrialization trend is this dirty power issue, and this is going to have some pretty big consequences, especially for large industrial firms. A good example being the Volkswagen story at the moment, with German power prices. Then this is a much bigger issue than anybody realizes. That has really big consequences for the industrial companies operating in countries that are using a lot of renewable energy. They either need to roll out vast infrastructure spending in order to clean that power, or they need to abandon renewable energies or find some other solution that's going to cost a vast amount of money. So the hidden this hidden force that's undermining industrials in these countries might be this dirty power issue. And so even if we solve the energy price issue that's coming from gas at the moment, but also renewables in Europe, then all of a sudden there's this additional problem to having all of these renewables that adds a whole nother level of cost that could undermine even further all of these industrial companies that are sort of hoping that electricity prices come down. So I think the lesson here is to avoid investing in industrials in the countries that are using a lot of renewables, especially rooftop solar and renewables that are not large scale, but piecemeal all around the grid. Avoiding those companies because there's sort of a hidden poison that's being introduced, that's being fed into their electricity system, into their machines, their equipment, and their electronics. And that the investments that they've made, the capital investments that they've made, are not going to last as long as they're assuming the depreciation is going to hit much harder than anyone is expecting. And if we don't figure out that dirty power is behind all of this, then they're still left with all of that damage, and they can't explain it. Right now, not many of them realize that this is the issue. It's growing quite rapidly, the awareness of it, but it's still not that widespread.
Well, certainly the fact that you have featured this topic in the most recent edition of the Fleet Street Letter is going to certainly bring it to a number of people's attention. And if what your whistleblower, I mean, well done finding a whistleblower who seems extremely well informed, by the way. But if what your whistleblower says is true, then as you say, you just can't really keep this under wraps for much longer. But the fact that you've already covered it in the Fleet Street Letter gives readers an opportunity to learn about it and to act upon it before others, which of course is precisely why the Fleet Street Letter was created by Patrick Maitland, Earl of Lauderdale, in the first place, to always be at least one, if not even two or three steps ahead. So thank you so much, Nick, for your contributions here. Absolutely fascinating topic. I strongly recommend, if you have not subscribed to the Fleet Street Letter, to do so. It will get you into this topic and other comparably fascinating and forward-looking topics. And also, if you like these chats that Nick and I, or that Nick has with other members of the Fleet Street Letter and Fortune and Freedom communities from time to time, I'd also encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm John Butler, Investment Director at Southbank Investment Research.